The transparency and openness promotion guidelines can also, they are also, we've made a Finnish version. You can find it in lapinaki.tiede.fi, which is so this is a group of researchers who are interested in promoting these things in Finland. If you're curious, check it out and join the mailing list from the website. So now we have this sort of a pipeline that allows for the scientific record to be self-correcting eventually. And so there's at least a possibility that things are being corrected in time. And so there was this, so we would want to know, like, what is the state of this? So how are we doing? If this is the process of science, what's the status of science? So there was a study that was looking at the computational reproducibility, and so as this says, they chose a random sample of 204 scientific papers in science, and they were able to obtain results on the code and the data from 44% of the sample, and they were able to reproduce the findings for 26%, which is not very good, right? Because if all of this goes out the window, what are we left with? Because if we can't reproduce even stuff from the same code and the same data, how is the anything else going to work out? And some things that are becoming more and more popular are reporting checklists. So there's this checklist called JARS, Journal Article Reporting Standards, that's both available for both quantitative and qualitative research. So if you Google this, you'll find it. And the Equator Network also has a lot of reporting guidelines for various different study types, and many journals, they want you to provide as a supplement and this reporting checklist, which unfortunately can also be gamed, and people don't really care about it that much. One thing that's becoming more popular also is preprints, and a preprint is an non-peer-reviewed version of a paper. So this is a process that's been going on in physics and engineering for ages already. So when they get a novel idea, they write it into a paper and a draft, and they post it onto this site called Archive. And so when you posted the paper on Archive, then people know, then you have sort of a claim to the research idea that, hey, I was actually the first one to do this, if it turns out to be very important, for example. And in other fields, especially medicine, there's been a lot of pushback against this sort of practice for various grounds. One of them being that these papers that get written by taxpayer money, they're actually these journals are making a lot of money by making the researchers and the universities pay additional taxpayer money to actually get those things published. And in Archive or other preprint services, you can read these papers for free. And there are now many of these around. So PsyArchive is one for psychology and social psychology. There are things about for I don't remember if this was sociology or social sciences and sports research. And so this was also an interesting discussion where this Brian Nosek, who you know from last week's readings, he said that this was a very shoddy piece of research in terms of the sample sizes. And there's this another person who says that, oh yeah, I actually collected 250 participants to replicate it, and so it didn't work. And probably this replication was never published. And so he says that do you have the thesis available somewhere so you could post it, and maybe we should start a thesis preprint archive. And so that thing is nowadays it's there. So if you want to post your master's thesis, for example, and you can put that onto thesis comments. And then we have a sort of this divide that might need some explanation between the confirmatory and exploratory research. So what this harking or hypothesizing after results are known, one reason why people do that is that everything is sort of, there's this normative pressure to do confirmatory research. So what people normally do is exploratory research that has to be framed as confirmatory research. So confirmatory research is where you have a hypothesis and you know that, okay, so I'm going to collect this and this kind of data, and then I'm going to do this analysis, and so I'm going to look at this hypothesis from the analysis. And as you remember from last week, that is a hell of a lot more convincing than saying that, well, I did this 25 different things and this one thing worked out, and so yeah, I had this exploratory result. But what we want to do is actually make it okay for people to do also exploratory research and to say that they are doing exploratory research when they are doing exploratory research. And exploratory research is very important. You have what's called the context of exploration, and it's a different thing to do than something called the context of justification. So here's a blog post about that if you want to have a look. And so the pre-registration revolution is something that where we want to actually distinguish these two things. And there are some research. So there's this famous saying that pre-registration is a plan, not a prison. So the point is to actually say what you want to do if you know what if you know what you want to do. But you can, when you get the data and all of that, you tend to realize that, oh, actually many of my assumptions about what I'm going to do are just stupid, so I need to do something completely different. And then some people think that, okay, pre-registration would prevent you from doing that, and it doesn't. It just gives you a plan and and forbids you from saying that you went to do something when you didn't actually go and try to do that specific thing. But if you remember what happened with the compare project, so that no one actually cared when it was found out that these research papers just completely misrepresented what they went out to study. What do you do? So we actually have something, the studies going on in psychology and the social sciences, where we are sort of following in the footsteps of medicine in this uh, term. But of course, it's different. Um, it takes time for these things to happen and get and become normative. And even though something is misused, doesn't mean that you're also obligated to misuse some of these tools.